King David. You know the name, right? The legendary warrior, the poet, the king who united a nation. But here's the big question. Was he even real? For centuries, that single question has sparked a pretty fierce debate. So today, we're going to dig for some answers. We're counting down the top 10 archaeological discoveries that might just settle the score once and for all. See, on one side, you've got the Bible's account, this powerful king, the founder of a huge empire. But on the other side, you've got this deeply skeptical view that says, hold on a minute, he was probably just a minor tribal leader, and the legend just grew over time. That's the real tension here. And for a long, long time, there was really no hard evidence to tip the scales either way. Wow! As historical as King Arthur. I mean, that's a powerful statement from Dr. Philip Davies, and it perfectly sums up what's known as the minimalist view. They argue that David's kingdom wasn't this grand empire, but just a small, insignificant little chiefdom. But you know what happens when we stop arguing and just let the stones speak for themselves? Let's find out. All right, let's kick things off. Coming in at number 10 is an object that everybody knows from David's most famous story, the sling. Okay, first things first, forget the little Y-shaped slingshot from the cartoons. That is not what we're talking about here. The ancient sling was a far more serious and, frankly, lethal weapon. It was just a simple strap, yeah, but in the right hands, it could launch a projectile over 400 yards with terrifying accuracy. Finding these things at ancient sites, even in King Tut's tomb, proves this was a serious weapon of war, not some kid's toy. For our ninth piece of evidence, we're heading straight into enemy territory, to the hometown of David's giant rival, Goliath. Back in 2005, at the archaeological site of biblical Gath, researchers found this. It might not look like much, but this little piece of pottery is a huge deal. It's called the Gath ostragon. So what in the world is an ostragon? Well, it's pretty simple. It's just a piece of broken pottery that people used for writing. Think of it like the ancient world's version of a scrap of paper or a post-it note. And this particular scrap had some very interesting stuff written on it. So why is this little shard so important? Well, for starters, it was found right in Gath, Goliath's hometown, and it dates to the exact same time period. And get this, it has two names written on it that are incredibly similar to the name Goliath. Now, it's not his autograph, but it's powerful proof that names like his were actually being used in that specific place at that specific time. It grounds the whole story in a real-world cultural context. All right, for number 8, we're making a shift. We're moving on from David the Giant Slayer to David the King, with a discovery from his very first capital city, Hebron. Imagine this. This was David's first capital. And archaeologists have actually unearthed city walls that date right to his reign. You can literally see the stones he would have known. But the evidence gets even more specific. They found these jar handles stamped LMLK, which means to the king, right alongside the name Hebron. That's like finding an official government seal. It's a direct, physical link to a royal administration in action. At number 7, we've got a discovery that connects us not just to David's kingdom as a whole, but to his personal life and his political alliances. The Bible tells us that David's son Absalom had a royal grandpa, the king of a place called Geshur. Well, guess what? Archaeologists have now found the capital city of Geshur. We're talking impressive city gates, monuments, all from that same era. This discovery confirms that the political and family ties the Bible talks about were with a real, actual, powerful king. Okay, so from the borders of the kingdom, let's go right to the heart of it all, Jerusalem. For number 6, we have an amazing story about an archaeologist who basically used the Bible as a treasure map to find one of its most famous lost buildings. This is just an incredible story of conviction. Dr. Eilat Mazar, using clues from the biblical text, started digging in a specific spot in Jerusalem and found something absolutely extraordinary. A massive building with walls so thick, we're talking 6 to 8 feet wide, they could only belong to a major public structure. And the pottery found there dates it directly to David's time, making it a very strong contender for his actual palace. Our number 5 discovery is a big one. It directly confronts that minimalist critique we talked about at the start. You know, the whole idea that David's kingdom was just small and insignificant. A tiny chiefdom with sticks or a massive fortified city built with 200,000 tons of stone? That's really the question that a site called Khirbet Qeiyafa answers. This huge fortress, dated right to David's reign, would have required a level of organization, resources, and manpower far beyond what some small tribe can manage. This is evidence of a strong, centralized government at work, plain and simple. The fourth discovery on our list zooms out a bit. It presents evidence not just for one king, but for the entire dynasty he's said to have founded. The Bible talks about a house of David, right? A dynasty that would rule for generations. Well, it turns out archaeology has been finding its fingerprints all over history. We have Solomon's famous city gates. We have seals that belong to the royal servants of King Uzziah. We have the personal seal impressions, the bullae, of King Ahaz and King Hezekiah. We even have King Jeconiah's name showing up on Babylonian ration tablets. The evidence for this royal line is just undeniable. Okay, we are in the top 3. This next piece of evidence is huge. It's an inscription from an enemy nation made within living memory of the king himself. So over in Egypt, at the Great Temple of Karnak, the pharaoh Shishak carved a list of all his military conquests. And among them is a place name that the famous Egyptologist Kenneth Kitchen identified as the Highlands of David. That's a potential reference to King David's territory made by a foreign superpower just about 50 years after he died. It's a testament to his lasting impact on the entire region. Our runner-up, coming in at number 2, is a famous stone monument that, thanks to modern technology, recently made headlines all over again. This is the Mesha Stele. It's a victory monument from one of Israel's enemies, the king of Moab. And what's wild is that it tells the same story as the Bible, just from the other side's perspective. And thanks to new 3D imaging, we can now confirm a key line that was debated for years. It mentions the House of David. Think about that. This is an enemy king acknowledging the dynasty that David founded. And that brings us to it, the number 1 archaeological discovery related to King David. This is the one. This is the find that fundamentally changed the entire debate. So in 1993, at the ancient site of Dan up in northern Israel, archaeologists found these fragments of an old stone monument. It's known as the Tel Dan Stele, and it contains 3 words that changed history. Beit David, the House of David. Right there, carved in stone, undeniable. This is the smoking gun. It was the very first discovery outside of the Bible to name the House of David. And who wrote it? An enemy king, bragging about his victory over David's dynasty. This proves that David was no mere legend. He was a historical figure so important that even his enemies knew his name and the name of his dynasty. It's the kind of proof you just can't argue with. So, from a debate that was just shrouded in doubt, a much clearer picture has emerged. Piece by piece, the evidence has built a case for King David that is now pretty much impossible to ignore. The question really isn't if he existed anymore, but how much more we can learn about his kingdom. You know, the historicity of King David is crucial, not just for understanding the Old Testament, but also because the New Testament identifies Jesus as the ultimate heir to David's throne. The evidence affirms David as a real figure of history, and it leaves us with this incredible question. As archaeologists continue to dig, what other parts of this ancient story are just waiting to be uncovered?